Assalamu alaikum and welcome to Views on News. We'll be talking, it's now the 101th day as Israel's atrocities against Gaza, against Palestine continue unabated. We'll be talking about the overall ramifications of the recent developments where we've seen the US talk about de-escalation, but we've seen also the Netanyahu Israel itself remains adamant on continuing atrocities against Gaza. Nevertheless, we are going to be talking about the situation within the allies when the White House clearly seems to be talking about de-escalation. We've also seen the hearing as far as the ICJ is concerned. We'll be talking about the legalities there and their effect on overall the situation in Gaza. Whether we can expect it to have any effect on overall the situation as people continue to die, children, women continue to die as we speak today, and have been talking about the atrocities now for 101 days. All of that today on Views on News. I have with me Dr. Salma Malik, who's a foreign affairs expert. Thank you for being with us today. We also have with us Brigadier retired Masud Ahmad Khan. Thank you for joining us today. And Dr. Farah Naz, thank you for being with us. Dr. Salma, like I said, you know, the situation in Gaza is continuing regardless. We've also seen a kind of belligerence. We've seen a kind of, as far as Israel is concerned, there is no talk about de-escalation. There is, in fact, an adamant refusal to go in that direction, and a avowal by Netanyahu when he says that they want to continue regardless, and they're going to be concentrating, as I understand, on the southern side of Gaza. Absolutely. In this kind of a situation, when US is clearly one of the biggest allies and perhaps the only country which can really make a difference in this situation, how important do you think this talk of de-escalation by the US?
Well, the talk is important. I think as many voices that say this particular dream world are welcomed, and but what matters technically, as you have also just mentioned in your preamble, is the commitment that US may show, full-fledged commitment and ardent commitment to actually mean what it says. If it is pressing for ceasefire, if it is saying that there should be a stoppage to the violence, then has it really done anything in that particular direction is the main question, right? One. Number two, of course, Israel is doing whatever it is doing in Palestine, in Gaza, because it has that particular confidence that not only will it be able to get away with it, but it also has US as its silent supporter, that even if they do this particular lip service, being champions of human rights and democracy.
But do you think this lip service even is a step, perhaps a positive, tiny positive step,
one can only
which
hope.
They weren't talking about? They weren't paying this lip service before.
You see, it's also the election time coming up now that the year 2024 has started. So they have to do the right type of stuff to appease all type of domestic constituencies. At the end of the day, at best what the US would say is that we pushed for peace. It didn't really happen, but because they're independent actors. So they have to do what they're doing, but US has that type of clout in
that
Israel,
it can make a difference.
With Israel, that it can do whatever it wants.
Brigadier Masud, there is, of course, the other factors like Dr. Salma said, and elections being one of them. And of course, this also talks about, reeks of the fact that there has been and is domestic pressure that the US is facing by its own civilians. We've seen the massive rallies, not only in Washington, but London, all over. Do you think, all over the world, we've seen the civilians rally for the cause of Palestine, perhaps in an unprecedented manner? And when we say that the US is paying lip service, the elections is one of the reasons, whatever one may say, is this diplomacy all over the world perhaps headed in the right direction? Is there hope, in your opinion?
Probably there is a hope. And because Tony Blinken, probably this is the 5th time he is visiting the region, and this time he came with a message from the President Biden, and with his visit there is a proper, we have seen some change in the foreign policy of the Israelis are concerned. They have said they are going to scaling down the operation when they talk of the northern Gaza. That is one. And second, they will be going to enter into a low intensity phase of operation. thereby they are going to going for a targeted operation. This was the required and demanded by the Americans also to scale down the operation. So that is one positive factor which I see from these recent developments.
So you think that there is in fact going to be a scaling down?
Certainly.
Okay.
This statement has been given by the Israelis.
Okay. So and when we talk about scaling down,
Yeah.
what do we mean exactly?
That means targeted operation. Instead of going for civilian population or killing innocent civilians, they may go for the high value targets or maybe the infrastructure of the Hamas wherever if they find out. So that is how things are going to happen inside Gaza.
We've seen the statement by Netanyahu saying that the country will pursue its war against Hamas until victory and will not be stopped by anyone, including the ICJ. We've also seen the hearing. Do you think that, again, its effects on the diplomatic front, the way that the hearing was held, the way that, we're looking at the South African, rally behind this cause, regardless of the way that we've seen the Israeli Prime Minister react to it, it's going to have its effect, whether they acknowledge it in this way or manner or not. It's going to have its effect on the diplomatic front.
Exactly. Let's first of all, we must appreciate the steps taken by the South Africans. Out of 194 Muslim the world countries, and that's 57 Muslim countries. They were not single country. So they have taken this initiative, and the stuff has been appreciated across the globe. Now, after this hearing, we saw for the last couple of days there was a hearing, and it will take some couple of weeks. But they are going to, certainly implications would be that they are going to endorse, if the decision is in the favor of South Africa, then they are going to endorse the resolution passed by United Nations General Assembly. They will also endorse the protests across the globe in support of Palestinians. And then also they can force, there is a provision in the United Nations that the United Nations Security Council is responsible. They can implement the decisions given by International Court of Justice. So there is a provision. At the same time, the implication, though there could be the symbolic, but it will bring international embarrassment for the Israelis. So that is very important. So things are going in the right direction. Although the previous history, if we see, as far as the International Court of Justice is concerned, in most recently during the Trump administration, there was a decision taken against Iran, but that was not implemented. Because of so many reasons, and similarly, there was in early 80s. Again, the court gave a decision in case the American involvement in Nicaragua. So again, that was not implemented, but the implications will be symbolic, and certainly it will have embarrassment for the Israelis.
But other than embarrassment, I don't know. Do we have Dr. Farah Naz with us? Dr. Farah, can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear.
Dr. Farah, we're talking about the overall effects of the ICJ hearing also. We're talking about the fact that, the kind of protests that we have seen across the board by civilians, whether we talk about all over the world breakout, perhaps it's not, we are looking at Israel's belligerence, we are looking at their adamant refusal, but at the same time, it is also true that it seems to be paving the way for the Palestinian cause in an unprecedented manner. And the fact that there is, there are voices all over the world, and now the hearing also, clearly resonating what is happening in Gaza, the suffering of the Palestinians, is having its effect bit by bit. And would you agree with that?
Yeah, I agree with it 100%. Like we can see, there is an unprecedented movement taking place in most of the Western countries. We have seen the way President Biden's election campaign was disrupted, and the mob completely asked about ceasefire. When President Biden started to initiate his speech, they said, no, we are going to talk about the human rights violation in Gaza. So these kind of things are very unknown to all of us, happening in these countries where the population, the civilians, they are standing against their leadership decisions when it comes to the state decision in siding with Israel. So yes, it's not only America, it's happening in London, it's happening in Europe, it's happening in most of the civilized countries who believe that human life really matters. But unfortunately, where human right does not matter, it is to the United States of America and Israel. But here we also have to understand that why Israel is going so abruptly against the people in Gaza, and they are labeling it and claiming it that they're doing it for self-defense. So these days, speaking of the International Court of Justice and the hearings that we are talking about here, there is a constant debate going on that under the banner of self-defense, what you can and what you cannot do. So there's a lot of debate going on about those kind of basic definitions. And then we also have to see, thanks to South Africa, who took the case to the ICJ, but we have to see how many other signatories are there to the Genocide Convention, where Israel is also a signatory to that. So there are almost 196 countries who are signatory to the Genocide Convention back in 1948 something. And this is what is happening now, where the states who are siding with South Africa, and they're taking the case to the International Court of Justice. Through your program, I would like to draw attention of the audience that whether ICJ will be successful in taking out a decision based on the existing definitions that we have under the Genocide Convention Agreement. I think America and its powerful alliances, they will be putting lots of pressure on the ICJ to tailor the decision according to their wish list. And why I'm saying that today we can see that the United Nations has been on the paper at the moment, where they're unable to do anything to help and support the people who are suffering in Gaza, irrespective of what ideology they believe in, but their life is threatened and they are not able to provide any sort of assistance, let it be human, let it be medical, let it be food, or anything that they require of. So probably ICJ will meet the same fate over there. They probably will not be able to take a decision based on the evidences that are up there through all these powerful countries.
Okay, fair enough. Let me ask Dr. Salma the same thing. Dr. Salma, do you agree with what Dr. Farah is saying? I mean, do you think that to an extent that ICJ will be under pressure? But, you know, of course, the evidences are before the court and also before the world, and the way that the hearing itself was held, how much would you say, you know, there is room for this truth to come out and reflect in the judgment of the ICJ?
Mahrukh, the tragedy of a genocide hearing and such incidences that it takes a lot of time, and as a result of that taking of time, more and more innocent people become victim of that genocide, and the perpetrator only stops when and as it desires, right? We have seen that happening in Germany against the Jews. We have seen it happening in several other places, including Bosnia-Herzegovina. We have seen it happening in Congo. And the US and other countries took their sweet time in actually coming across and declaring that it was a genocide or not. And it was too little too late. And a similar thing is happening here. What we are looking at is just the initiation of the genocide hearings or the ICJ hearings. Israel is going to retaliate, it's going to counter argue, and it's going to take a lot of time till such time that an actual decision takes place.
Okay.
Yes, an alternate scenario could be, and of course they're not talking about the jurisdiction, they're talking about the merit of the case. But an alternate scenario could be when countries as powerful as the US and others would have put their weight behind South Africa and other states, and they would have done what they wanted to do. But that's not going to happen here. And as Dr. Farah has said, that there's going to be a very strong push from the US that this should be mellowed down, and where they would not like to embarrass South Africa, but they would also not like to embarrass themselves as well as Israel. And they would like that it becomes toned down to an effect that things don't become so problematic. So given all of this scenario, How
you
long
think
it
that
takes,
it's going to
how it is going to happen,
as
it
far
is anyone's
we
wish
can't really
list.
say at this time.
We can't really say with a lot of certainty.
Right.
But one thing, of course, is very certain, and I'm sorry, I don't agree with Brigadier Saab on this. One can only hope what he's saying turns out to be absolutely correct, that the toning down in the violence and
So
Israel committing to better conduct, it will only do it when it feels that it wants
that it has
to do
no other
it.
option.
I think more than option, it would feel that it has fulfilled whatever it wanted out of Palestine and the agenda, and only then they are going to tone
What do you
down
think
their
the
effect.
agenda, I mean, Brigadier Sahab, what do you think agenda, when we talk about agenda, of course Hamas is that the reason why they say, you know, and we will not stop, and we've seen the statements come out, but what overall is behind the agenda? Of course, you know, of course, at the heart of it, it's also territorial.
The two goals of the Israelis, one is to eliminate Hamas militarily as well as politically. They want to demilitarize the entire Gaza enclave, that is one. And secondly, they want to get those prisoners of war taken by Hamas. Now 136 are there still in their custody, but their fate is not known even to the Hamas. So that is one thing. And I would like to add here, Netanyahu said when this proceeding was on in the International Court of Justice, he said, nobody can stop us, that is one. We will not accept the decision given by the Hague. And then he said, we will not accept the decisions or the actions being taken by the axis of evil. He was referring to the Hamas, Hezbollah, the proxies in Iraq and Syria, and Houthis. And they said, nobody will stop us. So that is his mindset. So that is how, but as I said, but symbolically something will happen, and that is very thing is very important. And then there are 15 members of this International Court of Justice. And one, there is the presiding judge. He is an American.
Yes.
So his vote will be the deciding factor, and hopefully I am optimistic the decision will be in the favor of South Africa, as they have based this petition, the 84-page petition, based on the 1948 Genocide Convention, which was concluded after the World War II. Of basically they are talking of human rights, and they are asking for immediate cessation of these hostilities, and for the humanitarian assistance they are asking. Probably something will positively.
We are talking about the world politics.
Yeah.
We are talking about allies forged behind political gains. So those realities, of course, are also right there in front of us. And the US and its relationship with Israel, all of that also. So, you know, you think that perhaps, you know, like Dr. Salma is saying, over-optimism in this case, perhaps, you know, is one
certainly
way of...
as it is said, the Israel is a favorite child of United States. So if United States goes away, there is no standing of Israelis concerned in the Middle East. That they don't have that potential and stamina to fight out, what to talk of the other countries, these militias. So, but they are getting all the supports, there is no doubt, from the United States. That's why there is no ceasefire. And hopefully, let's see, things goes in the right direction.
Right, fair enough. Dr. Farah, we're talking about diplomacy. On the diplomatic front, yes, you know, while we have to contend, like I said, of world politics and allies based on political gain, you know, what geopolitical standing of different nations, their relationships, all of that. Do you think what more can be done for diplomacy at this time? Because I think, you know, whether glass half full or, you know, half empty, maybe, you know, this little bit where we are seeing, you know, countries like the US at least acknowledge that there needs to be de-escalation is perhaps the right way, you know, the diplomacy is perhaps going the right way. Where do you extend that? How do you extend that? How do you move it forward, in your opinion?
Yeah, thank you very much. This is a very important one. We need to see how the Israel and the US, this gelling thing comes in. So when we talk about diplomacy, of course, the United States will stand behind Israel come what may. If they can stand at this point in time, they can do much more in times to come as well. And why I'm saying that? Because Israel is behind the US Treasury. So money is power, and from where the money is pouring into the United States and the way it is getting emerged, and you know, they are running their system, they require a stronger ally like Israel, and Israel require a stronger ally like the United States. So their bond is going to be much more stronger. The only thing that can really bring a change into the diplomatic relationship between the two countries is the citizens of the United States of America, because this is, unfortunately, the timing is very odd. This is election year, and President Biden, willingly or unwillingly, has to stand for election campaigning, and they have to go through all the processes, because at the moment we are coming across two candidates. They are standing for the presidentship. One is President Biden, the current president of the United States, and then President Trump. So they have to see from where, what, and how they can cash on and bank on to contest the election and to acquire their position. So if there is a tilt in their relationship towards Gaza and humanitarian cause and the ceasefire, Israel will get upset with that. So probably it will lead towards internal problem in the system that they are running in. So they have to see their own country matters, or the life matters that is happening and whatever is happening in Gaza. So the diplomacy will take some time to be understood in times to come. And if the United States can stand with Israel at this time, I think they can do anything together.
Fair enough. Dr. Salma, there's also, you know, as far as the ICJ hearing is concerned, we saw, you know, some of the lawyers remarking that there is a massive disconnect between the picture that Israel paints and its concern for the civilians in Gaza and the reality. You know, this, of course, the way that it was presented, do you think we can work towards, of course, you know, the images all over the world, the role that social media has played for this cause overall, but how do we change that perception, that section of society that perhaps is being targeted by Israel or being targeted by this picture that Israel is trying to, the propaganda that Israel is trying to put forward?
You see, in a war there are always two or multiple sides, and in today's war there are, I mean, multifarious sides. Number one, today's wars have become very hybrid in nature. Even if it is a very clear-cut war between two countries, there's so much of hybridity, and the media plays such a massive role. Plus the fact that governments have now started to, and it's not something new, it is since the Iraqi war that they've started to embed journalists who give their version and so on. But other than that, we have independent journalists who are trying to do their jobs there, and we have seen how badly they have been targeted by the Israelis, and every day there is a prominent journalist either from the Palestinian side or any other side who has been killed in this effect. So Israel would do anything in its capacity to block neutral perspective, to block any perspective that does not say its bidding, and that's what's going to continue. And journalists unfortunately become a big casualty in today's war, and that is something that has become a very big factor.
So how do you break this wall of propaganda?
How we break this wall of propaganda, it's very difficult. The international media groups, prominent international media groups which are running the news factor all over the world, all over the globe, are run by Jewish interest lobbies. They are supported by the money which is coming and filtering in from Israel.
Do you think there's enough, do you think, let me include Brigadier Saab in the discussion also. Brigadier Saab, do you think there's enough dent when we talk about the businesses owned, the Jewish owned businesses, and the way that, you know, the shout outs and the calls for boycotts? Do you think that there is enough dent has been made there to perhaps, you know, make a difference to the Israeli businesses?
Not really. Not really. I haven't seen any implications or dent as far as those things are concerned. As long as the Americans are there and Americans are behind them, nothing is going to happen. It is basically the things are, the control is with the Americans. If they decide tomorrow they will go for a ceasefire, but by design they are giving an opportunity to carry on and to kill those, eliminate Hamas, etc. But at the same time, this is very important one thing. as said, the Secretary Defense United States, Lloyd Austin, he said, Israel is going to face a strategic defeat if they are unable to stop civilian casualties in Gaza. And he gave this statement in the backdrop of a statement given by then General McChrystal, Stanley McChrystal. He was the then Joint Operations Commander in Iraq operations. He said, if you kill an innocent civilian, that give birth to, that will recruit another 10 terrorists and accordingly. So their objective was and is to eliminate Hamas, but the Israelis, they have failed. This is what now the Israeli public they are saying, and they say the popularity graph of Netanyahu has dropped to 4%. 94% Israelis, they consider Netanyahu responsible for this disaster, defeat, and the debacle.
Because there are also Israeli killings that are happening as a result of their onslaught.
Officially, they say it is around 1,200, but as for the Hamas, it is there in thousands when we talk of this. So the situation, at the same time, Netanyahu is trying to prolong this operation because he's already facing the corruption charges. There was an issue of judicial reforms, and then the moment there is a ceasefire, he is going to face, and his party is likely to leave the government. So these are the situations.
So those are the kind of pressures on Israel at this time. Whether it chooses to cave or not, we don't know. One hopes, of course. Dr. Farah, what about the role of other countries? I mean, as far as Arab countries are concerned, of course, they've said that they want to collaborate for de-escalation. They've also, as far as the role of China is concerned, how do you look at that overall?
Before we jumped into the question, I would like to comment on the loss of the boycott over there. We can see that Starbucks, like last month in December, they lost around $11 billion, which was a huge chunk of money for them. And then the McDonald's CEO, Chris, he himself clarified it that yes, due to the boycott, the chain has been badly affected. So same goes with most of the brands that are associated with Israel, one way or the other, and they are facing lots of problems. Now, coming to the question that you have posed now, the role of Arab countries, particularly the Muslim countries who are having some kind of due share in the international politics, international system, like Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Kuwait, UAE, they have a very significant role to play, but unfortunately, none of them are playing their due share of role that they were supposed to be playing. And thanks to South Africa, who took the lead and took the case to the ICJ. Then speaking of China, I think we all look up to China when such kind of problems emerge into the international system and mechanism. But we have to understand China's non-intervention policy, where China does not interfere into the affairs of other states, and there is a restriction on China. So they have self-imposed restrictions due to the previously signed treaties that they have signed with different countries. So it goes back to the Taiwan problem, and since then they cannot interfere into other states' affairs. So China's role is not that predominantly seen, and probably that is the reason of the non-intervention, that they are not able to come forward. The only thing that can bring a change is if all states stay unite together under like the OIC platform, and then of course like through the South African platform that is already been applied upon. Only then there can be a change which can come up to lead towards the problems that Gaza and the Palestinians are facing at this stage.
Fair enough. Dr. Salma, do you agree with what Dr. Farah is saying? She's saying that, it's going to, the role that Arab countries are playing, we also have seen them. They want to, their statements that they want to play a larger role. They perhaps, very candid conversations between Miller, of the US and, Arab countries overall, and what they can do to de-escalate the situation. But of course, as far as region is concerned, every region and regional countries have their own limitations when they want to exercise whatever they can do in this situation.
Mahrukh, there are two things. One aspect that we are ignoring here is that there's already been an extension of what is happening in Gaza and what Israel is doing in another war theater, and that is the two attacks against the Houthi rebels in Yemen. And that is, if this pattern continues, and of course the rebels themselves are attacking sea ships which are carrying Israeli goods or things related to Israel. So if this pattern continues, then the US, UK and other countries would find more valid reason to open or extend the war theatre beyond Palestine. And that is going to make the situation very complicated, and that is where the concern of the Middle Eastern countries really comes in.
That the region itself really getting more volatile overall in the spread of it.
Exactly.
Yes.
And also another factor where Farah is saying something very relevant, that China is under its own compulsions not to intervene. However, we have also seen that China in the recent years and in the last couple of months made a very solid intervention, having this rapprochement worked out between Iran and Saudi Arabia, and that was a massive breakthrough.
Yes, exactly.
Agreed that it wasn't a conflict situation, but having two countries which did not agree with one another over several factors, this was something very, very major when it comes to China. So actually, when you look at this particular picture which is unfolding at this moment, Israel has initiated, it's using the Hamas and the axis of evil, quote unquote, that it talks about, yet it has no clear plan as to where it would like to actually culminate this escalation that it has really increased. So it's also victim of its own violent narrative. And that is why it doesn't really have that type of exit window. There are still hostages left in Gaza. Their families are asking for their return. Israel hasn't done anything about it. That's short window of ceasefire for 7 to 10 days that brought about very little relief. But then when you look at how the Palestinians are suffering after the ceasefire period, that's far more pathetic than what was happening earlier on. And the same, and as has been said, that the Israelis themselves are very unhappy with Netanyahu. And if this theatre goes beyond its purview, then it's going to be an extremely difficult situation for the Middle East, and it's virtually asking that the entire Middle East is up in frame. And then countries would start taking sides, and the escalation may go in it may go vertical, it may go horizontal, and it may actually go beyond what any of these countries were thinking of. So when the US tries to press this point of having some cessation of violence, having some cooling down period, they're also looking at the fact that they cannot have their allies up against one another. And then, of course, with elections coming up and so many other things, the oil supply lines might choke up. Already there's talk about the petrol prices going up. So it's going to have massive global repercussions, not only regional level, and the type of effect that no one has really truly calculated.
We also have had, of course, China call for a peace conference, and they've also said that they're talking about the two-state solution, so to speak.
True.
So that effort into diplomacy we've seen as far as China
will keep doing that part.
How far they can extend it, of course, I mean, there are limitations like we talked about. But the role of the UN, Brigadier Sahab, we traditionally, as we saw the role that it's played, there was a lot of, a lot of criticism also on the ineffectiveness overall as far as the UN is concerned, because, of course, of the way it's structured and because of, its own, the other countries like the US and the power veto and all of that. How do you look at that role now at this time?
First of all, I would like to comment on the role of China and the rest of the countries. China and Russia, they can play a significant or constructive role as far as the United Nations Security Council is concerned, not in the region, but in the region it is the leading role is being played by the Qatar and followed by the Egyptians. Rest the Gulf countries, they are making statements, etc. But the recent developments in the Red Sea, we have seen Bahrain aligning themselves with the coalition force. So that is a shift as far as things are concerned. If today, if tomorrow, if Saudis or the UAE or any other Arab country, they join the coalition, so that will have disastrous consequences, because there is a delicate truce understanding between the Yemenis as well as the Saudi-led coalition. So if something goes wrong, these Yemenis, they are going to strike the targets inside Saudi Arab and etc. So as far as United Nations is concerned, I am concerned that has become irrelevant. Despite the passing several resolutions. Nobody is going to bother about those resolutions. And we have seen what is happening inside United Nations Security Council. One veto, the resolution is gone. So that is very unfortunate part of it. So in this world, the Americans, they have a role to play.
But do you think this is underscored? I mean, this has underscored the ineffectiveness of the UN in a manner like never before.
Yeah, exactly.
And do you think we will perhaps have to, it will move towards a restructuring?
There is a requirement, there is a dire requirement of restructuring the United Nations as a whole. Because then if you cannot take decisions and implement those decisions, if you fail to implement those decisions, so it is an embarrassment at international level. Look, they have taken so many decisions but not implemented. 24,000 killed inside Gaza, including 10,000 children. So nobody is bothered. Even the international community, when we talk of the civilized West, they are least pushed, but as the public is concerned across the globe, they are voicing their concern about the killing. So even within Israel, there is a majority of population, they are asking and demanding the Netanyahu government to stop the killing of civilians. So that is how things are going. I don't know what will happen, but as I said, the two statements given by scaling down and going for a low intensity operation, if that happens, maybe a step in the right direction.
Dr. Farah, I want your comments on the UN also. I mean, for the primary body, so to speak, responsible for peacekeeping, and the way that it's been exposed, the way that its flaws have been exposed, you know, perhaps, and rendering it so ineffective at this time when, like we are talking about here, you know, so many civilians and children die. And you know, when it was about countries, you know, like we've seen the situation in Kashmir on the home front, so many other countries all over the world, like we talked about. Do you think there's going to be room for it's perhaps going to change now, because this is a case in point of their effectiveness?
Well, I think this is not the first time like an international organization which seems to be not efficient enough or like properly, you know, in a position to take decisions. The League of Nations was one of the examples in that context where the United Nations came into existence. So at this point in time, we can see that the role of the United Nations is highly questioned, where the human rights, the UN Human Rights Commission itself, their leadership says that we are not in a position to protect people, and there is a lot of pressure on us, where the UN General Secretary, he also claims that he is helpless in helping the people in Gaza. So these kind of statements shows that the United Nations has remained on paper alone, and the role of the veto member states is much more stronger over there. And we can see, if you even check the veto member states out of China and Russia, if we take them out, the rest are all partner in crime kind of countries who support one another in times of their troubled water. So in that context, we can see that the United Nations needs some quick kind of reforms. But like here, the question comes to my mind all the time is that, do we really need United Nations at this point in time as well or not? Because its role has been questioned so deeply and badly. And if we even bring reforms into the United Nations, the existing setup, will it still be in a position to function smoothly, where the role of the United States and its stronger allies will be still much more stronger over there?
But so, are we in a position to dilute the power of countries like, you know, permanent members like the US, the power of veto? Do you think that we are, you know, we are able to perhaps target that area and change it, you know, amend that part of the constitution, so to speak, of the UN?
Well, when you say we, I'm not getting really clearly what you mean by that, because
I mean the world, so to speak.
Yeah. So the world probably realizes it very well that the United States is the sole superpower today, and they know when, where, and how to showcase their muscles. They are doing it so openly in Gaza, and they can do it elsewhere as well. And this is not the first time where they are showing their muscles, but I must say it that this is the first time that they're doing it so boldly and confidently that they do not care about what their own people says and talk about and how they feel about the war and how the world is taking seeing them. They want to stand and support their ally in whatever circumstances they are demanding their position with them. So this is really, this time it has been very strange for all of us to see how the United States is responding. And if the world can bring a change into the existing setup and, like, setting some kind of limitations for the veto member states or the powerful states in the United Nations, I think the role of the US will still remain very, very strongly dominant over there. And China and Russia has always been put under pressure. Of course, when it comes to taking decisions, the China and Russia has its due share and due role to play. But when it comes to rearranging the power dynamics, I think the other are much more stronger.
Fair enough. Dr. Salma, rearranging the power dynamics, I think Dr. Farah has really hit the nail on the head here. Unless there is a certain rearranging of power dynamics, we won't see a change in the Gaza situation. Of course, you also mentioned how there's a fear of a second front. There is a very real fear of Hezbollah strike in northern Israel also, and then further to that, the escalation that will then move in all over Middle East.
True.
There's also now southern Gaza is targeted by Israel at this time. Where will they go after this?
They've already started to talk about severing the border from Egypt. And that's the point. I mean, it's convenient to initiate a war and to up the escalation in a war, but it's very difficult that once you're part of that war, how do you tone it down? Then you become a victim of your own narrative. You become a victim of your own development. And that is the problem here. And the point that you were saying, which actually should be there, that there's a restructuring of United Nations, but the restructuring of United Nations will actually become a little bit more unequal in terms of certain countries, such as the middle powers aspiring to get a higher vote or a higher superior seat in the United Nations, rather than anyone giving up its privileged position. If the League of Nations was an unequal body, the United Nations becomes far more unequal. And why would I ever support any movement which gives me a lot of empowerment and I go for something more democratic when I have that single vote clout in a Security Council to veto everything? You may recall when the United Nations tried to take a unilateral action in favor of Gaza, the US was the first to veto it, and that was the end of the story altogether. So they are going to use these instruments as much as possible, and they're abusing the system. They're actually making United Nations become exactly what it was not supposed to become. But at the same time, we also need to see one thing, that every minute that we sit and talk about Gaza and the atrocities, the numbers that you have put on the ticker here, they're adding. The people dying, the houses being destroyed, the territories being lost. And this is, at the end of the day, what the Israel wants. Palestinians out of their homeland, Palestinians going anywhere they would like to go, not at all staying in Gaza. And the other point that you said about making the other strip also now being targeted. So it's going to become a situation where, if such type of momentum continues, if it stops today,
it is going to spill
few
over.
years down the lane, another such episode happens. Today it's Hamas, tomorrow it's going to be some other legitimate reason for Israel to invade these areas.
So then it will be a very real, there's Brigadier Sahib, there's going to be a very real danger of this spilling over all over. And that is what, is, I think the world needs to be cognizant of. And I mean, of course, the US particularly.
Yeah, exactly. That is something serious will happen if it spills over. At present, see what actually happened. Initially, Israel's concentration was Gaza, and subsequently it was Israel which basically spilled over the operation when they carried out air raids in Lebanon. Then they went for Syria, Iraq, as well as then that was the reason. Then West Bank also, then they carried out operations. So that was the reason when Houthis came in, and they, in retaliation of those killing of innocent civilians, they started striking. Now the war has already spilled over to the region, the proxies, as well as into the Red Sea. And today, see what actually happening in Red Sea. And we have seen on the night of 11th, 12th January, the barrage of missiles which were fired by US-led coalition on around 60 targets in 26 locations. So that is how things are going out of control, but as a whole, but still there is a limitation now. They are trying to drag Iran into the conflict, and thereby they are going to seize the opportunity. If Iran is in, they are going to strike at the developing nuclear sites. That is how they are trying to think. And if regions, as I said, there is a delicate truce between the Yemenis and the coalition. If the Saudis, the United Arab Emirates and any other country, say for example Oman, if they facilitate attacks through their country, then there's things are going to spill over. Then yes, of course. But at the same time, at the present, everybody is trying any further escalation. It will have potential for a disastrous consequences for the regions. So I suppose everybody has this in mind to avoid this dragging other countries.
Perhaps that is why the US is saying that there needs to be, whether it's lip service or not, for them.
Yeah, exactly. That's why Iran has so far stayed outside of the conflict.
Unfortunately, we have very little time. Dr. Farah, I'd like your quick comments overall before we close.
Yeah, thank you very much. Here, like we all talk about the role of United Nations, the role of United States and all those powerful countries, but we are neglecting a very important player in this war, and that is India. India is playing under the table and nobody is talking about it, where we can see there India and Israel is having diplomatic ties and they have close association with one another. But here, Israel is going to, this year, to have 81,000 workers from foreign workers, and they have to be established in Gaza once they clean Gaza from Palestinians. And among those 81,000, bulk of them is going to be coming from India. So these are all the ringing bells and the warning signs that we should understand what is actually happening in that part of the world and who is siding with and why they are siding with. Only then we will understand how to deal with the problem. That's all.
Fair enough. Thank you so much for being with us. Dr. Salma Malik, thank you for joining us. Brigadier Masud Ahmed Khan, thank you for being with us. Dr. Farah Naz, thank you so much for joining us on this very important topic. Overall, of course, as we sit here and talk about, again, like Dr. Salma also said, we sit here and talk about what's happening in Gaza, what's happening. The Israeli atrocities continue to rise. The people, the civilians continue to die. The civilians continue to be displaced. Children continue to die. Homes are destroyed. And of course, we look to the world. We look to, of course, countries like the US to understand the potential ramifications of this conflict, not only for the region, but for the world also. We look to organizations like the UN. We look to the ICJ. We look to anyone and everyone who is in a position to make a difference. And more important than all of that, I think, are the civilians all over the world that must continue to protest, that must continue to agitate against the atrocities in Israel, that is committed by Israel in Gaza, so that their governments can actually it will make a difference to, again, countries like the US. Thank you so much for joining us today on Views on News.